Hello and welcome to the LaRouche Organization's Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche for September 23rd. Now, our organization has been involved in a lot of activity in the recent days, and that's also because the world has been experiencing a convulsive situation, particularly from the time of the 9/11 commemorations until now. There's been an acceleration of developments. And of course, these have all been happening in the apparent context of the Afghanistan pullout. Well, in the course of the last 10 days, we also have had this alliance between Australia, Great Britain, and the United States in the Indo-Pacific theater announced. And while the alliance calls itself AUKUS, Helga Sept LaRouche and John Segerson, both of them founding members of the Schiller Institute, have insisted that we not refer to it as AUKUS, but rather Orcus, the god of the underworld. And the idea is that although, of course, this is a sea alliance, and yes, submarines are the apparent topic, that's not the underworld we're talking about. And this idea of a kind of projection of post-imperial, post-colonial naval power in the Pacific, in the image of the old ruled Britannia of the 19th century, is a loser. It's dead on arrival. And what it does, besides provoking war with China, which it will in fact do, is it creates a circumstance in which a further disintegration of the globe is assured, and it runs away from the primary task to be taken up, a task that is best exemplified by the theater of Afghanistan, where the United States still has a presence, and where multiple nations, China, Pakistan, India, Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, these nations are all there. China, if I didn't mention that, they're all there. And so the issue of allowing for a change, a shift away from geopolitics toward a higher conception of human cooperation, a conception that Lyndon LaRouche and Helga Sept LaRouche had fought for well over 30 years ago right now, precisely in this area. Conception that got called by the Chinese the New Silk Road, but which we've continually referred to as the World Land Bridge. And it's an idea that is the necessary idea for the future of humanity. Now, in contrast with that, we've got various forms of criminal behavior, much of it powered by the impending full-scale collapse of the international financial structure. One of the things to understand about the COVID virus is that when Lyndon LaRouche wrote back in 1985 a document which was an appendix to a report we put out at the time, which is called Economic Breakdown and the Threat of Global Pandemic. His section of that report was called The Role of Economic Science in Projecting Pandemics as a Feature of Advanced Stages of Economic Breakdown. Let me sort of break this down in this sense for you. The pandemic process that we saw erupt last year is an expression of advanced stages of economic breakdown. It is not a medical matter. It is also a medical matter. And importantly, while over decades, many people have tried to criticize Lyndon LaRouche by saying things like, well, he always said that there was going to be this financial collapse, and it didn't really happen. He always said that the entire system was going to melt down, and yes, it came close, but it never really occurred. Lyndon LaRouche continually made the point, particularly after he published his triple curve in 1995, that what he was talking about was that there had been a clear, not just devolution, but a kind of disengagement between the physical economy of mankind the ability to sustain the 7.5 billion to 8 billion people that are on the planet now, and the financial and monetary structures that were increasingly dominating the globe. And that these monetary structures would either depopulate the globe as they then converged on an inevitable thermonuclear war, or they would be overthrown. And those structures would have to be summarily overthrown, not altered, not reformed, but overthrown. So this is what he meant when he talked about the crisis of the system. And so the thing we've been living through are advanced stages of economic breakdown in the transatlantic world. The U.S. economy stinks. It has never undergone a economic recovery. Some elements of something you could call recovery may have existed, but there was nothing which was systemic throughout the economy ever like that. Rather, what you have done is you converged on a situation in which new diseases, new forms of diseases, and recurrence of old diseases are now beginning to rack the planet increasingly, coming from areas that have pretended through their media outlets to be the cynosures, the avatars, the models of human progress and scientific progress and all that kind of thing. That's not been the case. And we are seeing tonight, in specific, a drama play out around the nation of Haiti, which is one of the uglier expressions of this process of willful and deliberate economic breakdown. It's got the forms of slavery, the rounding up of people by lassoing them, the putting people in shackles and putting them on airplanes or airships, like the old slave ships, not telling them where they're going and then dropping them off to die back at home. The rape of the nation, including the recent assassination of the leader of the nation, which, from anything anyone knows, was carried out by multiply connected intelligence agencies, and could not have actually been carried out without some knowledge of the United States. So it's a particular projection of the same thing you see in Afghanistan, and the same thing you see actually in the form of this Indo-Pacific theater policy. Not the same policies, they're not the same thing tactically. What they are is they're the same thing morally, they're the same thing ideationally. They come from the same snake pit of axioms, of failed axioms of imperial rule, which have been characteristic not of the United States, but of the empire called the British Empire, from which the United States broke. What we want to do tonight is to discuss with you something that will be appearing in the upcoming issue of the Executive Intelligence Review, but over the next 3 days in particular, we want to be an all-out campaign of our organization and the people that want to work with our organization. And that is about the question of the emergency, not just reconstruction of Haiti, but the collaboration that should go on between the United States, China, and other nations in the Caribbean in particular, for the purpose of, as with Afghanistan, bringing about a new era of human cooperation that transcends geopolitics in favor of the idea that people come first. This is an idea that President Franklin Roosevelt expressed with respect to the nation of Haiti at the time that he was president. But it's a notion that it will take us to resurrect. And in this time when the United Nations is meeting, we've had an occasion to address nations as a whole, and we can do this outside of the United Nations as well. It seems that this is particularly appropriate as a task that this organization take on, together with many of the other things that Helga has called for. So to discuss this, we have Rich Freeman, who has worked out a plan. He has a program that he'll be discussing with you that he has just authored or helped to author, and then some other people have worked with him to improve it. And we're also asking that other people, folks from Haiti and otherwise familiar with that situation, would work with it. It's called the Schiller Institute Plan to Develop Haiti. So Richard Freeman is now going to speak to you, and then we'll get to questions and discussion. So, Rich?
Yes, thanks, Dennis. I'm always very happy and always quite honored to be on this program. because of the people, because of Dennis, and just what we have to do. I think, just to pick up on what Dennis said earlier, any moral, caring person would have been horrified by the photos that were splashed across the international media the weekend of September 18th, 19th, which showed upwards of 12,000 Haitian migrants huddled in these squalid conditions under the Del Rio International Bridge in Del Rio, Texas. This bridge connects the United States to Mexico, desperately hoping to be granted asylum in the United States. And I think, and I hope, all of you who are on the phone tonight saw that. After the absolutely horrific January 12, 2010 earthquake in Haiti, and there have been two, January 12, 2010, and then August 14th, 2021, one that was just about a month and a week ago. Tens of thousands of Haitians fled their nation. And you have to also know, in that 2010 earthquake, 319,000 Haitians died in the period of the earthquake and then the subsequent period in which they were not treated at all. They were given tarps to live on, out in the open elements, not protected by anything. And a lot of nations said, we're going to do this for Haiti, we're going to do that for Haiti. A lot of words, nothing was done, or nothing of real substance. So what happened was some of the Haitians fled the country. They went to other places, including in Ibero-America. They went to Cuba, they went to Venezuela, they went to, of course, they came to Florida, some of them New York City, of course. But what happened was that there was a rumor that the Biden administration was going to, which claims to have a humane immigration policy, that they were going to allow under the what's called a protected persons system to be allowed to come, if they got into the United States, to become allowed to live here. And that had happened in the past. It was a total rumor. It was a total lie. So people from all over gathered, and what they were treated to was they had Border Patrol agents on horseback using the horses' reins to threaten them. They were herded, literally herded like cattle. And of the many nationalities of immigrants who've been gathered at the U.S. border, and there's been many different ones, only the Haitians, to our knowledge, are being deported. And what they were doing is they're told, well, some were told you're going to Florida, some weren't told where they were going at all. And when they were on the plane, they were shackled at the wrists, at the waists, and ankles while in flight. Now you think about this. Horses' reins being used like whips, people in shackles. Conjure up in your mind what's a parallel image. How about Africans in shackles being led onto British-controlled slaver ships of the Royal African Company, being sent across the Atlantic into a lifetime of chattel slavery? This is what we're confronted with in Haiti. We're confronted with a nation that is so poor that if you talk about reconstruction, it's difficult because there's not much to reconstruct. Let me just give you a couple of parameters, and what I would like to do is give you just a little bit of a shape of what Haiti is, and what we will be doing, we Americans, and you on this phone call, because you have a special responsibility if you're on this phone call, because we have a moral responsibility to Haiti. It is our nation neighbor. And just to give you something you may not know, there's an amazing history of Haiti. The person who people may know, Alexander Hamilton, our first Treasury Secretary, who directed, with others, the writing of the U.S. Constitution, co-wrote the Constitution for Haiti. We were the first two republics in this hemisphere. But there was a problem Haiti had. We were white and they are black. And the French absolutely would not let, and the British, let the Haitians develop in the way that they could have over the next 200 years. Their independence was in 1801. But what do we need to look at? Well, I want to briefly take you into a journey, and we're going to discuss how you transform a country. How can you do it? where do you start? What do you need to do? And it's going to be the Americans working with the Chinese. There's no other way around that. And it's a good thing. It's a very good development. And the Haitians themselves as a nation. But let me just give you a couple of parameters to tell you why I said there's almost nothing there. I was not exaggerating. Haiti has the highest mortality rate for infants, the highest mortality rate for children under 5, and the highest mortality rate for mothers giving birth in the Western Hemisphere. And their rate is higher than many African nations. 59% of Haiti's population earns less than $2.43 per day. So that means if you get that, you're not even going to be able to have a human existence. You can't even subsist. The World Food Program reports that 40% of Haiti's population, 4.4 million Haitians out of 11.25 million Haitians who are living in Haiti, are what they call food insecure, which means that you're on your way to possible starvation if conditions turn worse. So this is what is 700 miles, the country of Haiti. It's on an island called Hispaniola, which two-thirds of it are Dominican Republic, and the eastern third is Haiti. We have to take the moral responsibility in a total all-out mobilization. Now, let me just say what you're going to encounter. People are going to say, "Why Haiti? What's the why are you talking about Haiti? I don't even know where they are, or even if I know where they are, we have all these other questions." This is a challenge, and if we can solve the Haitian question, which we can, we will solve the question of the development of the United States. If the world, and if the United States working with China, rather than, as Dennis just identified, planning to supply Australia with submarines, which are nuclear-powered, but could be equipped and made nuclear-capable of delivering things, even if they're not, they're going to be sent to China for direct confrontation. We have to change that, and we can change that. But it's going to take, if the world can address 3 central questions, and that question is build a universal health system, which Helga LaRouche has talked about, and I will go into a little bit, but I think many of you know. Develop Afghanistan and develop Haiti. Those are not 3 separate operations. If we can solve those questions, along with all the other ones that we have, including developing the United States, that will be the impetus for developing the world, including our own country. And we will become not only better people through that, we will become an actual, once again, developed and prosperous nation. Now, let me just identify a couple of characteristics, and some of this will be in this report, which is coming out, as Dennis said, in the next issue of the Executive Intelligence Review. And one thing I'm going to just suggest to people right now is, once you get off this call, please take a map and look where Haiti is, just so you know, because it's a little bit hard to go through some of the things we're going to say, because it takes a sense of physically what can be done. But let me give you 2 characteristics. And by characteristics, I mean if you understand these questions, you understand something about the fundamentals of the economy. When we were looking at this question, we couldn't figure out why Haiti has such a low we knew why Haiti has such a low electricity consumption per population, because they've been looted for 125 years. And I let me just divert from that for 1 second, because I want to say something here. People look at the fact that Haiti had an earthquake in 2010, an earthquake in 2021, Hurricane Matthew, which destroyed whole parts of the island in 2016, and El Nino, which wiped out a lot of the food production from 2015 to 2017. And the attitude that's taken towards Haiti was, well, they're in an earthquake zone, and they're in a zone where you can have storms. But there's also another cynical attitude, Well, that's Haiti. They're poor people. It's going to be like Haiti. It's not going to change. And therefore, it takes a mental shift that we have to be responsible, the Schiller Institute, to make that change, that of course it can change. And if you want to talk about earthquakes, talk about Japan. Out of the 14 to 15 tectonic plates, 4 of them are in Japan. They have 2,000 faults, and they have earthquakes. And yet they have solved it through infrastructure, and they have solved it through research and so forth, and it can be applied to Haiti. And what we're going to look at is the basic infrastructure, seaports, airports, hospital systems, which they desperately need, roads, sanitation plants, sewage treatment plants. In the entire island of Haiti, or the portion of Hispaniola, which is Haiti, there's 11.25 million people. They have one sewage treatment plant, one sewage treatment plant for the entire country. Sewage runs down canals that pass through Port-au-Prince, which is the capital city, and has about 3 million in Port-au-Prince and the environs of it. And it runs openly down, which brings waterborne diseases like cholera and other such diseases. So you look at this thing, while there are natural so-called disasters, and, an earthquake happens, but you can earthquake buildings, you can earthquake schools, and so forth. All of these, if there's the right type of economic development and earthquake-proofing technologies, which are known, you can mitigate 95% of that. So you can't just say, well, it's just the environment in which Haiti lives. So let me give you just 2 characteristics which will sort of give you a sense of what we have to tackle. And when I say that, let me also bring immediately an element of hope. Because when you have something that you can tackle, but you know how to tackle it, you can inspire not only Haitians, but ourselves, because we're going to be doing some of the work and producing some of the goods in the United States that are going to be needed for that project. Haiti's development is America's development. In Haiti, they have 37 kilowatt hours per person per year. That will maybe run your refrigerator every day for a year. America has 11,741 kilowatt hours per person per year. That's 320 times that in Haiti. So we were looking at this and saying, well, how can Haiti exist? It's not even as bad as things are. It almost defies the imagination. How are they getting by? And then we found out Haiti is run by charcoal. After IMF and Wall Street and City of London and Malthusian pigs were destroying Haiti for the last 125 years, in the last 25 years, Haiti shifted to charcoal. Now, in case you don't know what charcoal is, it's very straightforward, and you probably do. You burn a tree, and then you take the product of the tree, charcoal, and you use it. 75% of all energy in Haiti is charcoal. It's 90% in Port-au-Prince. And in other areas of the country, they don't even get electricity, so they just cut down trees for whatever they can. Now, the problem with this is that, first of all, as you may know, it's very unhealthy to be in a house that has charcoal. It also denudes the landscape. And the great Frederick Douglass, one of the most powerful native sons of America, who was a slave, an escaped slave, and who became the general counsel for Haiti in the late 1880s and 1890s, and for his whole life was devoted to the cause of the advancement of Haiti. He described how it was beautiful, and because of the climate, it was green throughout Haiti. The woods on the mountainsides were very valuable, and so forth. Haiti now only has 30% coverage It was verdant. Now it's only covered 30% by trees. So when you get a storm and a deluge, then the water runs down tree-denuded mountainsides. But the key thing about charcoal, which I would ask you to think about, is this is a 16th century technology. So Haiti has been devolved backwards into that technology. And unless we can assist Haiti to break out of it, it will never develop. Because you can send all the aid short-term that you want. The people will never grow. The economy will never grow. It has to move to electricity, to a higher energy flux density, which will allow high-speed rail, which will allow 5-axis machine tools, which will allow CAT scans and MRIs in hospitals. The other characteristic of Haiti is their health system. We have an issue in the United States of COVID. It's said that Haiti does not have a high COVID rate. It's very hard to know, but they definitely have it. It's just that this thing is probably grossly understated. Guess what the vaccination rate in Haiti is right now? 1%. Because they've never been given the vaccine. Because they're going to be left there to die. And one of the things that we have in our program is how much vaccine Haiti will need, which can be taken from the surpluses in the United States, in Canada, and elsewhere, and gotten there on an emergency basis so that they can get 60% of their population vaccinated, a minimum situation. Now, the way to think of this is that they have been looted by the French banks, looted by Wall Street, looted by Britain. Again, that can be overcome because these banks are going to be put through a bankruptcy reorganization as we create a new Bretton Woods. And Haiti can set up a Hamiltonian system which will emit hundreds of billions of credit. But some of this is going to have to come from a new Bretton Woods of China, Russia, India, and the United States. So I just want to touch on 3 elements additionally and then open this up. Because I also do want to give you a sense of the history of Haiti, which I'll go to in a second. We looked at what has to be done. The Chinese have come forth with some proposals. The problem is that Haiti still recognizes Taiwan. Its neighbor Dominican Republic broke and recognized China just 3 years ago. But Haiti recognizes Taiwan because of the pressure that comes from the United States, not because that's what they would choose to do per se. And we have talked to people in the Haitian diaspora in the United States, some very, very good people, and also to people in Haiti. And they have indicated that they think Haiti should make the change to recognize China because without that, China will not invest in Haiti. But not only will Haiti need to develop, but you have to think of Haiti as part of an island with Dominican Republic, and you can have an international railroad between them. But Haiti can become the hub of the Caribbean, and not only of the Caribbean and all the nations in the Caribbean, but of also Central America. And if they did, you have countries like El Salvador, Honduras, Belize, Jamaica, obviously, and others in the Caribbean. That's an area of 92 million people. And that can, in turn, become linked up to the World Land Bridge, which Dennis identified earlier. So that's the way to think of Haiti. It's not just developing Haiti, it's developing the whole area. Now, there's two Chinese companies that went to Haiti in 2017. They spent 8 days there, and they worked out some very interesting plans. And when you see the EIR, you will see some of the pictures of what they developed. One of them is called the Southwest Municipal Engineering Design Research Institute of China. So it will go by the initials SMEDRIC. And the other is the Metallurgical Corporation of China. And they worked out a plan, at least to take Port-au-Prince, and for $4.7 billion, do the following. And it's a good plan. It's a good starter plan. They would build a new treatment plant, a sewage treatment plant that can treat 180,000 cubic meters of sewage per day in Port-au-Prince. They would build a water purification plant that would purify 225,000 cubic meters of water per day. They would install 450 public toilets, which you may think is, why do you need it? But it's very much needed in Haiti. They would institute a garbage collection system, which doesn't exist, a landfill system. They would widen and improve 100 kilometers of roads, which is 62 miles, of 12 main roads in Port-au-Prince. Now, that may sound small, and it is, but if you know Port-au-Prince, and this is a very important start. They would also start building water drainage runoff systems to prevent flooding for 150-year floods. Those are floods classified as such because they are exceptional, and with such large water accumulation as occurs only once every 100 or 50 years. That's why they're called 100-year floods or 50-year floods. And the rainwater would be collected into pipes, discharged into rivers and the seas. This is the first step towards flood mitigation. They would build a 600-megawatt natural gas power plant, which could be expanded to 2,000 megawatts. They would build a city hall and so forth. Haiti welcomed this. The mayor of Port-au-Prince, in a letter to the head of one of these companies, said, "We are pleased to accept the Port-au-Prince Municipal Renovation Project construction planning prospect." There's also a project, and I just want to mention it, I won't go into it in depth, that would build a rail system. And it's a project it's called Haiti, Dominican Republic International Railroad. And would go across all the ports from the south of Dominican Republic up the coast, all the way to the north, into Haiti, and all the way down to the southern Jacmel, which is in the southeast of Haiti. And would connect all those areas. We've drawn a map of this, which you'll be able to see in the pamphlet or article. The thing about this is in one of the pamphlets, and this railroad was being, the company that's proposing, and I just want you to know, it's called something called the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, CCECC. This company builds the high-speed rail in China. This company is building the Lagos to Accra Railroad in Nigeria. It's a 836-mile railroad. This is a very well-proven railroad. Now, the last thing I just want to mention about what the Chinese are doing, and which America would work with in doing this, is in the plans for the Port-au-Prince. As I said, that's $4.7 billion. But the two companies I mentioned, Smedrick and the Metallurgical Corporation of China, they are talking about, that's for Port-au-Prince, 30 to 70 billion investment in Haiti. So 30 to 70 billion, and they're serious, because these are plans that our Chinese companies put forward, but they're approved by China's National Development and Reform Commission, which is their old 5-year plan, and they make the final decisions on all the plans that China builds internally and apparently externally. 30 to 70 billion, the really strategic China-Pakistan economic corridor, which I'm sure we've spoken about on this show before, is planned for 62 billion, and that's a major project. So if they're putting out in their literature 30 to 70 billion, this is on that level. And so our idea of this Haiti becoming a hub, apparently is also China's idea. And they want 100 billion for the Caribbean as such. Now, what's our perspective on this? And I just want to give you two other things, a little bit of Haiti's history, and we'll open this up. The perspective, after the first earthquake, Lyndon LaRouche said, look, we need a 25-year treaty with Haiti. Haiti's been promised this, promised that, told patch this, patch that. It's never gotten what it was told it was going to get. And so what we need to do is have such a treaty arrangement with a country that is our ally. But then in a 2004 radio interview, so this is before the 2010 earthquake and before the current one on August 14th of this year, in which buildings were flattened. And let me just tell you, if you want to know about Haiti's health system, In the area where this earthquake occurred, which is in the southwestern part of Haiti, and I urge everyone to take out a map tonight, spend 5 to 10 minutes making yourself familiar with this, because you're going to need to talk to other people about this. You're going to talk to councilmen. You're going to talk to senators' offices. You're going to talk to your friends, and you need to know what this country looks like. But in this area where the earthquake broke out, which is called Petit Trou de Nip, which is about 93 miles from the capital, this is an area that has 1 million people, and they had maybe 24 doctors. They had one doctor who was a surgeon, and he went to a corrugated shack, basically, and set up operations, and he was overwhelmed. He couldn't handle it. I mean, this is how little Haiti has, and what the task that we have before us, how great it is. But this is something that we can do. And don't feel burdened by this. The yoke is light if you have the commitment to mankind. Now, in this 2004 radio interview, LaRouche said the following, and this is a principle that anyone that knows Lynn for a long time and watches him and so forth knows is the way Lynn thinks. This is what he said. In my view, you always go to the worst case to set a policy. In your own country, you look at the poorest layer of the population and say, will this policy work for their children and grandchildren? And if it works for the poorest ones, justly, then it'll probably work for everyone. As Franklin Roosevelt defined that, always go to the forgotten man. Take the person who's the greatest victim of injustice or neglect and start there. And prove that you are ready for the general welfare of the people by showing you're willing to face that problem. Look it in the eye and talk about curing it. So we have a moral responsibility for the future of Haiti. And if we can demonstrate that the policies can transform a poor nation like Haiti, the poorest in our hemisphere, then they can successfully transform any nation in the Caribbean, any nation in the world. And it's better right now to just tear out the bad and construct a new, better paradigm using infrastructure, science, and technology. So let us say that we use this SMEDRIC, Southwest Municipal Engineering Design Research Institute of China, and the Metallurgical Corporation of China's plants. I just want to bring 2 other points up. Haiti has a port on its northern northeast, and it's called Fort Liberty. And there was a plan in 2011. Actually, the U.S. AID put out bids for this plan to build a port there. Now, Fort Liberty has a very limited port. It doesn't do very much at all. But what does it have? Well, it's 75 feet in depth. Our most trafficked port in the United States is the Port of Los Angeles. And its depth is 53 feet, and they can handle every large container ship in the world. And if you look at Port of Newark, which probably more people are familiar with, and Port of New York, the depths of those ports are between 25 and 32 feet. This is 75 feet. So it's a natural. What happened? Well, someone found that the coral reefs in this port were deteriorating. And it wasn't just somebody. It was the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Now, that's the mother institution for the World Wildlife Fund. And it was founded specifically by Julian Huxley. Julian Huxley is the person who said in 1946 that we should revive eugenics, but clean it up a little bit because because of all the gas ovens, it sort of gave it a bad name. But we will do it as the environmentalist movement. That's the institution that he founded. So this port, which is a wonderful idea, and which could not only be traffic for Haiti, it could break down large container ships from all over the world and then send them, for example, to Fort Lauderdale Fort Everglades and the other ports in Florida need to have. They can't handle large, 16,000, 20,000, what they call TEU, TEU containers. But such a port at Port Liberty, and divide it and send it to the United States and other countries. Truly be a hub. Another thing I just want to mention, and then just a little bit on the history, but there's much that we can do. We have to overhaul the labor force. The labor force right now is the following: 40% in agriculture, 13% in industry and in services. Okay, well, 40 and 13 are 53. So you're asking, what's the other 47%? The informal economy. This is where people sell chewing gum or street food or drugs or stolen goods. 47%. So when you read these figures that, Haiti has this unemployment rate, you got 47% that are just being wasted, and then another real unemployment rate upon that. So we have in this report, we have 8 sections of critical points of the economy, and one's on the labor force. We have to transform it. We have to start teaching people skills. We should have about 10 to 15 machine tools parks around the island, in which each park there's about 10 companies, machine tool companies, and each company would have something between 5 and 30 workers. And these would have apprentices, mostly apprentices. And they would work 3 to 4 years learning from skilled master machine toolists that could be drawn or recruited from the U.S. or China or Japan or Switzerland or Italy, and develop a core in Haiti. And we have to introduce the Humboldt reforms as an education system. I'll tell you, maybe in the question and answer period, what their education system looks like. So we're going to reform that. We have to change the labor force. So we get rid of the informal economy, and that we end up in 15 to 20 years with 1 million manufacturing workers and 4 million productive labor force people. I just want to give you a little bit on the history, and then take questions. Haiti was founded by Toussaint Louverture, a slave, and they had a slave revolt. And this terrified the imperialist masters in France and Britain and all around the world. And there were people who were terrified in the United States, including Thomas Jefferson. I mean, you can't have former slaves running a country, can you? So what happened was Alexander Hamilton was a collaborator of Toussaint, and he co-wrote Haiti's constitution. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln, our histories are completely intertwined. He became the first president to recognize Haiti, and he signed the bill extending diplomatic recognition. Frederick Douglass, who was one of America's greatest sons and was the U.S. General Counsel to Haiti from 1889 to 91, as I said, spent his life working for Haiti. And I just want to give you a quote from Douglass. That it was January 2nd, 1893, when he was opening the Haiti Pavilion at one of the World's Fairs. He said, quote, "The little community of Haiti, anchored in the Caribbean Sea, or Caribbean, has had her mission in the world, and a mission which the world had much need to learn. She has taught the world the danger of slavery and the value of liberty. In this respect, she has been the greatest of all our modern teachers." Now, in 1943, Franklin Roosevelt, in a White House toast to the visiting president of Haiti, Elie Lescott. And let me also say, Roosevelt was the first American president to ever visit Haiti. American presidents just didn't go there. He was also the one that dispersed all the American troops that were gathered in Haiti, because Haiti was occupied by American troops on behalf of British and French debt collectors. But this is what he said, Roosevelt: "I had the most intense interest in the Republic of Haiti." And that's one of the reasons he was a great president. and the development of his people in a way that will never mean exploitation by any nation again. He personally pushed through a little Haitian TVA, which is in the Artibonite Valley of Haiti. He did not live to see that, but in the 1950s, they built the Pellegrin Dam, which provides the hydropower, especially for Haiti's rice crop. And then the last thing I just want to introduce is a statement that Lyndon LaRouche said. And this is in the January 30th webcast, 18 days after the January 12th, 2010 earthquake, which killed 319,000 Haitians. And not only did it kill them, but they were given tarps to live on, or little shacks. And Lynn said, look, you've got to move people out of the lowland. Port-au-Prince is below sea level. So you've got to move them out of the lowland and to the highland, and you've got to build them housing. It was not done, and cholera struck, and another 10,000 Haitians died needlessly. But in any event, this is what he said. Okay, we make a contract with the government as a treaty agreement between the United States and Haiti to assure the rebuilding of their country in a form in which it will actually be a functioning country which can survive. End quote. And then he said this 25-year treaty will reestablish the efficient sovereignty of the nation of Haiti. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to change the agenda. We've got to tell people, I don't care about, this and that issue. America has to take the lead with China in developing Haiti. It's not a good thing to do. It's not an option to do. It is morally necessary we do that now, because people are dying. And if they don't do this, and we have a collapse of the international monetary system, or the spread of certain variants of virus to a nation that has a 1% vaccination rate, then we're going to see a spiraling death rate of 1 to 2 to 3 million. And we will be responsible because we did not lift the finger. But it's also something that we can do rather joyously. So that's what I had wanted to present.